I need you to understand this from the beginning. Silence was never my auntie's weakness. It only looked that way to people who mistake loudness for power. The moment it became clear they thought her quiet meant compliance, something inside me shifted. I felt it before I could explain it, like a warning bell going off too late. It happened at a family gathering that was supposed to be harmless. Long table, forced smiles, voices layered with false warmth. My auntie sat there like she always did, present, prepared, carrying the weight no one acknowledged. Then someone laughed and called her the backup option, not a joke whispered, loud, confident, designed to land. The laughter didn't stop with one person. It spread, chairs shook, glasses clinked, jokes stacked on top of jokes, each one sharper than the last. I watched people who depended on her every day turn her into entertainment. They spoke about plans, decisions, futures, like she wasn't even sitting there, like her role was optional, replaceable. What made it worse was knowing the truth. She was the one who handled the crises, the one who fixed what broke, the one who stepped in when others failed. Yet decisions were being made without her voice, without her consent, without even pretending to ask. They took her labor as a given and erased her authority like it never existed. My body reacted before my mind did. My chest tightened so hard it felt difficult to breathe. My jaw locked. Heat rushed up my neck and into my ears, burning with a mix of anger and shame. I wanted to speak, to interrupt, to flip the table if I had to, but I didn't move. I watched. Then it happened, the sentence that changed everything. Someone leaned back and said, smiling, "She's always there if the real plan doesn't work." That was it. That was the line that cut through the noise and lodged itself into my memory like a blade. Backup. As if her entire existence was a contingency, not a foundation. I looked at my auntie. She smiled politely, not a forced smile, worse, a controlled one, the kind that keeps peace at the cost of dignity. I watched her nod slightly, like she was agreeing to disappear, like she was being erased in real time and choosing not to fight it in public. That's when I realized this humiliation wasn't accidental. It wasn't careless humor or social clumsiness. It was practiced, rehearsed. They had grown comfortable reducing her because she never corrected them, because she let them believe she didn't mind. Public disrespect hits differently when it comes from family. Strangers don't know your sacrifices. Family does, and still chooses to forget them. Sitting there, listening to them rewrite her value, I understood something clearly for the first time. This wasn't new. This wasn't a one-time insult. This was a pattern. I rewind to the beginning, long before anyone laughed at her, back when my auntie quietly became the stabilizer of our family without ever being asked. She didn't announce it. She didn't claim the role. It just happened. When things wobbled, she steadied them. When tension crept in, she absorbed it. She became the calm center everyone leaned on, even when they refused to name it. Whenever a crisis hit, she was the one who stepped forward while others conveniently disappeared. Medical emergencies, financial scares, emotional breakdowns no one wanted to deal with. She handled them all with a level head and steady hands. People showed up afterward, once the danger had passed, acting like they'd been there the whole time. She never corrected them. I know what it cost her. I watched her turn down opportunities she deserved. Jobs that would have taken her farther. Promotions that would have given her independence, because the family needed her close. They framed it as loyalty, as sacrifice for something bigger. She believed them, at least at first, or maybe she just chose not to fight it. Over time, gratitude shifted, slowly, quietly. Thank yous turned into assumptions. Assumptions hardened into entitlement. Her help became expected, her availability mandatory. If she hesitated, it was noticed. If she complied, it was forgotten. The balance tipped so gradually, no one thought to question it. I remember moments when her contributions were minimized or completely rewritten. Someone else would take credit for a solution she had quietly engineered. A problem she solved would be retold as a group effort. She'd be reduced to a supporting character in stories where she was the reason things didn't collapse. What hurt most was the pattern. Privately, they praised her. Late-night calls filled with gratitude. Soft voices telling her they didn't know what they'd do without her. But in public, she was dismissed, talked over, treated like background noise, important enough to use, not important enough to respect. Living like that leaves a mark. Being constantly relied on while never being acknowledged wears you down in ways people don't see. It teaches you to measure your worth by usefulness instead of dignity. I saw that weight settle into her posture, into the way she paused before speaking, into the way she chose silence even when she had every right to speak up. There was a reason for that silence, a betrayal she never talked about, not openly. Someone she trusted once exposed her vulnerability and turned it against her. After that, confrontation felt dangerous, endurance felt safer. She learned that surviving quietly hurt less than fighting and losing again. Watching her taught me patience before I ever understood what patience really was. I learned how to wait, how to observe, how to read rooms without announcing myself. I learned that strength doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it just remembers everything. And this is the part I have to own. For a long time, I mistook her silence for peace. I thought she was content. I thought she was fine. I believed the same lie they did, that if she wasn't protesting, she must be okay. After that night, the disrespect didn't fade. It multiplied. What had been casual dismissal sharpened into deliberate exclusion. I could feel it in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room, then resumed without her input. The tone changed. The smiles became thinner. The message was clear. They felt emboldened now. Decisions started happening fast. Too fast. Plans were announced as if they were emergencies, framed as things that couldn't wait for discussion. Especially not with her. Timelines were suddenly tight. Meetings were last minute, and somehow she was always informed after everything was already decided. Not asked, informed. I began noticing the whispers, voices dropping when she walked past, doors closing just a little too quickly. I caught fragments, half sentences, coded looks, names exchanged like secrets. There were meetings she was never invited to, despite being the one who would be expected to clean up the fallout. They were building something around her, not with her. The tension thickened in shared spaces. Rooms felt crowded, even when they weren't. Her presence was treated like background noise, acknowledged just enough to be dismissed. People spoke over her, around her, through her, like she was furniture, necessary, but not deserving of attention. They gave her responsibility without power, tasks without authority, blame without voice. She was expected to execute decisions she had no hand in shaping, to fix outcomes she had warned against, and when something went wrong, they didn't hesitate. I remember the exact moment they blamed her. A problem she had flagged weeks earlier finally exploded. Fingers pointed immediately. Accusations flew, sharp and confident. I watched her listen as someone said, "If you'd handled this better, we wouldn't be here." She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend herself, but her eyes didn't drop either. That's when I started paying attention in a different way. I stopped reacting and started recording, mentally at first, then carefully. Dates, conversations, contradictions, who said what and when. I traced patterns instead of arguments. I built timelines instead of excuses. I learned from her without her ever telling me to. She noticed everything too. I could tell. The pauses before she spoke, the way she filed information away instead of responding. She absorbed details like she always had, but this time there was something different in her stillness. It wasn't resignation. It was preparation. She didn't announce it. She didn't warn anyone, but I could feel it building beneath the surface, like pressure behind a sealed door. Whatever she was holding onto, whatever she was planning, it wasn't going to be loud. And it wasn't going to be merciful. By then, the air felt unstable. Every interaction carried a charge. Every smile felt temporary. I knew deep in my bones that the situation wasn't just tense anymore. It was about to rupture. The phone rang late at night, the kind of hour where nothing good ever comes without warning. I recognized her number immediately. My auntie never called this late unless something had finally crossed a line. When I answered, her voice was calm, too calm. That alone told me everything had changed. She didn't start with emotion. She started with facts. She told me there were things she had been holding onto for years, things she never spoke about because she didn't need anyone panicking before the moment was right. I listened, frozen, as she began to unfold the truth piece by piece. She had protected information the entire time. Not rumors, not feelings, records, agreements, emails, documents, conversations saved instead of argued over. Proof quietly gathered while everyone assumed she was too passive to notice what was happening around her. She told me about the evidence she had preserved, files organized by date, decisions traced back to their origin, responsibilities mapped against authority. Nothing emotional, nothing exaggerated, just reality preserved exactly as it happened. While they underestimated her, she archived them. That's when I understood something I'd never fully seen before. Her silence had never been fear. It was strategy. She wasn't avoiding conflict. She was controlling the timeline. She let them believe she had no defenses, so they would never check for them. Then she said the words that made my stomach drop. She explained the legal authority she held, authority no one had questioned because they assumed she wouldn't use it. Agreements signed years ago, powers delegated and forgotten, clauses everyone else skimmed past. She hadn't forgotten any of it. In that moment, it hit me all at once. She didn't just have leverage, she had leverage over every single decision maker who thought they were untouchable. Every rushed meeting, every whispered conversation, every move made without her had only strengthened her position. She chose this moment deliberately. She didn't react when they humiliated her. She didn't strike back when they blamed her. She waited until their confidence made them careless, until the imbalance of power tilted completely in her favor. Her voice never wavered as she spoke. It stayed steady, almost gentle, while she described what was coming next. That contrast terrified me. The calm delivery paired with the scale of what she was about to set in motion. Chaos was imminent, and she was completely in control of it. I felt fear at first, real fear. Then it shifted into something else as understanding settled in. Awe, respect, a sudden clarity about who had actually been running things this entire time. She paused before ending the call, just long enough to let it sink in. Then she said it, quietly but firmly. "It's time," she told me, "to stop being the backup." The confrontation unfolded in a place where they believed they still had control. Familiar walls, familiar seats, a table they'd gathered around countless times to make decisions without her. The atmosphere was confident, almost casual, as if nothing had changed. They didn't know they were walking into the end of their own illusion. My auntie stepped forward when her name was mentioned, not rushed, not hesitant, composed, grounded, undeniable. The room shifted the second she stood. She didn't ask for permission to speak. She didn't wait to be invited. She simply took the space they'd denied her for years. She began by correcting the narrative, calmly, precisely. She spoke about her role, not emotionally, but factually. She dismantled the story they had built around her. Every suggestion that she was optional, every implication that she was secondary. Sentence by sentence, she replaced assumption with truth. Then, without warning, she presented the documents. Clean folders placed on the table, legal agreements, signed authorizations, financial records. Authority they had forgotten existed because they never imagined she'd use it. The sound of paper hitting wood felt louder than any raised voice ever could. I watched faces drain of color. The same people who laughed at her now stared in disbelief. Eyes darted, hands trembled, confidence cracked. The room went silent in a way I had never experienced before. This wasn't shock, it was realization. The confrontation turned emotional when the truth reached them personally. She addressed each one directly, naming actions, dates, consequences, no insults, No exaggeration, just clarity. When someone tried to deflect, she didn't argue. She waited. When someone tried to deny, she slid another document forward. Consequences began unfolding immediately. Financial authority revoked, legal responsibility reassigned, access removed. The power structure collapsed in real time, right there in that room. No delays, no appeals. Everything they thought was secure unraveled under her control. They tried to interrupt her, to talk over her, to regain the upper hand the only way they knew how. It didn't work. She spoke once, firmly, and they stopped. Not because she raised her voice, but because they couldn't afford to ignore her anymore. Arrogance drained out of the room and was replaced with accountability. People sat straighter, voices softened, apologies surfaced, hollow and late. Respect didn't return out of sincerity, it returned out of necessity. And then it happened. Official recognition, authority acknowledged, roles redefined. What had been denied for years was finally spoken aloud. She was no longer a backup. She was the final authority. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument that had come before it. No one spoke. No one knew how. The room felt emptied of air, like something essential had been pulled out and replaced with truth. Chairs creaked as people shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. Relationships recalibrated instantly. You could see it happen in real time, the way people adjusted their posture around her, the way their eyes followed her movements now. Conversations paused until she acknowledged them. Authority no longer had to be asserted, it was assumed. Respect came back the moment consequences became real. Not the performative kind, the careful kind, the kind that arrives when people finally understand limits. The same voices that once laughed now measured every word before speaking to her. The apologies came, of course. Quiet ones, awkward ones, some emotional, some strategic, all of them late, none of them strong enough to undo what had already been decided. She listened without interrupting, without softening her stance. Forgiveness was no longer a bargaining chip. When it was over, when the room finally cleared, I saw something I hadn't seen in her before. Release. Not dramatic, not loud, just a long breath she'd been holding for years finally let go. Her shoulders lowered, her eyes softened. The weight she'd carried alone was gone. The family structure shifted permanently after that day. Roles were no longer blurred, power was no longer borrowed, expectations were clear, documented, and enforced. The system that once leaned on her without credit now stood balanced, or didn't stand at all. Watching it all, I realized something important. Justice doesn't have to be cruel to be complete. She didn't humiliate anyone the way they humiliated her. She didn't mock or expose more than necessary. She let truth do the work. She chose dignity over revenge-fueled humiliation. That choice was louder than any insult could have been. It reminded everyone in that room who she was without needing to remind them why they'd underestimated her. Boundaries replaced obligation. Help became optional, not assumed. Respect became the entry fee, not the reward. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't carrying everyone else's weight. What followed wasn't chaos. It was calm. The kind that only comes after decisive action has finally been taken. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: never underestimate a quiet people. Silence isn't emptiness, it's observation, it's memory. It's restraint waiting for the right moment. The loudest person in the room is rarely the one with the most control. I've learned that backup roles are almost always assigned to the strongest ones, the dependable ones, the people who can be relied on without complaint. They're labeled that way not because they lack power, but because others are afraid of what would happen if that power was fully acknowledged. Silence does not mean consent. It never did. Just because someone doesn't argue doesn't mean they agree. Just because they endure doesn't mean they accept. Sometimes silence is simply someone letting you expose yourself completely before you're held accountable. Watching my auntie taught me everything about timing and power. She didn't rush, she didn't react. She waited until emotion would weaken her case and facts would strengthen it. Power isn't about speed, it's about control over when the truth is released. Documentation is louder than arguments. Proof outlasts emotion. Records don't forget. While others were busy dismissing her, she was preserving reality exactly as it happened. And when the time came, reality spoke for her. Respect often arrives only after consequences, not because people suddenly grow empathy, but because boundaries finally exist. That's the part no one likes to admit. Respect isn't always given, it's enforced. If you're listening to this and you're being sidelined right now, reduced, underestimated, or quietly used, this story is for you. My auntie didn't change who she was. She simply stopped protecting people from the results of their own behavior. You have more authority than you think, more leverage than you realize, more power than they're hoping you'll never discover. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who's been watching the longest. So ask yourself, who really holds the power in your life, and who have you been giving it to without question? If you want more stories where silence turns into justice and underestimation turns into authority, subscribe. Because eventually, the truth always speaks.